Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we're discussing the very important issue of the forgotten Jewish refugees from the Arab countries. Shortly after the Jewish state was established in May 1948 during Israel's War of Independence, over 850,000 Jewish people and residents of nations in North Africa and in the Arab lands were uprooted from their communities and had to be absorbed into the newly established state of Israel. And this is their story of justice and reconciliation. And today I am joined by Edwin Shuker, who is the Vice Chairman of the International Division of the Board of Deputies. Edwin, it's a great pleasure to have you as my guest on the Middle East Report today.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for airing this very important issue.
No, it's a very interesting issue, and you've also got a very, very interesting story to tell. Can you share with us your background? I know that you are an Iraqi Jew, you're a Jewish refugee, and I know I would be, and I know our viewers would be fascinated to hear your incredible story.
I have a fascinating story, but actually it's the same story of 856,000 people. Each one of us has a story to tell, and I am privileged today to speak on behalf of all of them. I myself was born in Iraq, in Baghdad, in 1955. My community has been in Iraq since time immemorial. As you might know from your Bible, Abraham, the patriarch, was born in Ur, which is Iraq. And in fact, today's portion of the law is Lech Lecha, which chronicle his birth in that part of the world. In about 2,600 years ago, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, attacked Jerusalem twice. First time in 597 BC, and then again in 587, when he completely destroyed the first temple and brought the Jews as captives to Babylonia. The Iraqi Jewish community traces its history and its culture and its heritage back to that time, 2,600 years ago. Unbroken chain of Jews lived in Iraq 1,200 years before the Arab army came in from the Arabian desert. So really we are the indigenous population. We're not Jews who live in Arab countries. We were there 1,200 years before. And the last 1,400 years, we lived together with the Arab majority under many, many different invasions and rules and things like that. The Iraqi Jewish community had its golden age in the 20th century when the British armies took over. They won the war, First World War, and occupied Iraq and gave Iraq its independence, basically. So they set up the Kingdom of Iraq with King Faisal I. And for the first time, the Jews were now equal citizens for all. And because the Jewish community there were already into commerce, and as we always seem to be in whatever country we go to, the British found in Baghdad alone, a third of Baghdad was Jewish. About 150,000 people who were, a lot of them were educated, spoke European languages, and were ready to work for the Kingdom of Iraq. Totally and absolutely loyal citizens in every form and way, including the very first finance minister of Iraq was Jewish, who till today in Baghdad University they learn the tactics that he negotiated, how he negotiated the oil contracts with the British, and how he safeguarded Iraq's economy and put it on the right direction. So the Iraqi Jews in the 20s and 30s were full citizens, building in every aspect. They were in political parties, they were editors, they were artists, singers, musicians, part and parcel of the state of the Kingdom of Iraq. However, by the time I was born in 1955, the backbone of that community was broken. I think we will talk probably later about the 1941 Farhud. But prior to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the Iraqi army joined the other 6 armies of the Arab League in order to annihilate and destroy the young State of Israel almost before it was born. The defeat of the Arab armies caused a backlash on the Jewish community. Like towards the establishment and within the couple of years after, suddenly the Jew found himself being seen in Iraq not as a citizen, but as a spy, as a fifth columnist, and pressure was put on all aspects, including the killing of several people who were actually mainly and most importantly was Shafiq Hadas, who was one of the most prominent Jew in Iraq, the wealthiest, most prominent, most well-known, and he was arrested, charged with helping the Zionist enemy, hanged outside his own home, and his body swung there outside the home for the whole day. That sent messages to the Jewish community that after 2,550 years, their time is up. There really is no place for them in Iraq. So when the Iraqi government suggested that whoever wished to leave can register, almost 90% of the people registered over that 1-year window of opportunity. But they only registered because of the persecution and the hell that they were put under. In 1st of April 1951, the parliament held a special session on a Shabbat without the Jewish MPs and took a decision, which is law number 5, 1951, which says everyone who actually registered has all his assets nationalized, frozen, taken over by the government of Iraq. Well, that means all. Fixed assets, safe deposits, bank accounts, the works. Whatever the Jewish community has accumulated over so many millennia suddenly was taken away in one pencil stroke. They were given 3 months to leave the country. They were denationalized, and it was very, very strict quota what they can take with them. 4 dresses for the ladies, 1 ring, 4 books, and so on and so forth, 1 pair of shoes, and about 15 pounds sterling. That's all that's left. And so the vast majority was stripped out of everything they had and shipped into camps. First of all, there was no direct flight to Israel, so they were sent to Cyprus, and then from Cyprus they went to Israel. Later, because of the volume, flights went straight to Israel. But in Israel, as you said at the beginning, there were hundreds of thousands of those people coming in, all without nothing, just the shirts on their back. So they were put in tent cities. I mean, my grandparents lived there for years, 6, 7 years, I think. All in tents, and you can imagine the change from being wealthy and welcomed and respected in their place of birth. Now they're actually destitute in a foreign country. Israel had a different language, which they did not know, a different culture, but they were placed in tents. I think with a ration of, I recall my great aunt telling me that 1 egg per week per person was allowed, and years of that. And so you can imagine what happened to that glorious community almost overnight, just totally stripped of the most important thing, of its dignity.
And can you describe what happened to your family and yourself, particularly when the Baathists came to power and almost the Nuremberg-style laws they put in place against the Jewish people in Iraq?
Well, after the big migration of 90% of the people who were left were very few. for reasons. Each one had a different reason. For example, my father, his parents left, his siblings left. Just him by himself was finishing university. He was doing law, and so he stayed behind. The same thing with my mother. She had her father and mother, but all her siblings were out. And then they, as it happens, they married, and I was born in 1955. Now, but between 1955 to 1958 were 3 years of relative peace, because there was the King Faisal, there was a parliament, the British were there, they were powerful, and they would not have allowed abuse of human rights on the tiny Jewish community that was left. We were below, I think there was less than 8,000 people altogether. Now, in 58, there was a bloody revolution. The king was killed. All his family were killed. And the Jews had to cope now with a different set of rules. I recall being 8 years old in 1964, when every Jew was asked to go in turn, stand outside the Home Office there, to apply for a document that tells you that yes, you exist and yes, you are a Jew. Only the Jews, of course. And I remember at 8 years old with my younger sisters standing outside the heat of Baghdad in August. Because you queue and there will be a couple of hundreds, 300 people in front of you. And you never know whether you'll ever make it that day or not. And if you don't make it, you come back the next day and the next day. And what was the result of that queuing? The result of it was we were asked to bring our Iraqi nationality documents. These were taken out of us. And instead, every family was given this yellow ID. This yellow ID states here that هوية الاحتفاظ بالجنسية العراقية. It tells you, yes, you do have a Iraqi nationality, but actually you don't have it in your hand. What you have in your hand is a yellow document that distinguishes you from every other citizen of Iraq. That was my first memory now I knew I was a Jew and I was to be treated differently. The laws of Iraq, whenever they used to come after 1963 and the coup of the Ba'ath Party, the first time they arrived, the law was a normal laws like here, and then at the end it says, as for Jews, and there will be an addendum which treats them completely different. Absolutely formally, officially, there was no hiding or trying to pretend otherwise. So that's the atmosphere that we lived in. Towards the 67 war, things hotted up, major. And I remember people walking into our house. I opened the door. They asked where the phone was. I showed them where the phones was. And they just literally pulled it out of the walls. Pulled the wires, and they said Jews are not allowed anymore, this method of communication. So on and so forth. We were banned from social clubs. Universities would not take Jews. Every time you switch on the radio or television, there was a play or something. It was really incitement of the population to prepare them for the 67 war. So, and it got worse after that. By the time 1968 came along, in July 68, the Ba'ath Party came along. And Saddam Hussein was their henchman. He wasn't the president, but he was right there. And our life turned even worse than that. People were taken out off the streets and disappearing. Young people, anyone over the age of 18, might not return back home. People were taken, and you had to search for where they put them in. People were tortured. Some were lucky after torture, and that their families managed to secure their release. My father was arrested that way. Those who were not lucky faced a fate worse than death. They actually were tortured to death. That only the Ba'ath Party of Iraq could devise such methods of utter inhumane ways of killing people. I come to January 26, 1969, a day that we will never forget. We woke up that morning and we were told there's a national holiday. And I recall me and my sisters jumping and dancing for missing school. There was no schools, there was no work. And it says also that we should switch on the radio and television at a precise time so that we know why this celebration, why is this national holiday. It turned out to be the announcement that the government has managed to bust a spy ring, that the members were arrested, they were tried, they were convicted, they were judged, they were executed, and on that day, their bodies will hang in the main public square of Baghdad, Saht al-Tahrir. And suddenly the shot goes, and you see 14 out of 14 people that were hanged that day, 9 were Jews. They were hanged in gallows with white linen surrounding them and the word Jew written on those who are Jews, with their full name, full address, without cover. Their heads were not uncovered, and the great Iraqi people were dancing underneath these bodies the whole day until dusk. Everyone visited the president and the vice president and the ministers, and all day long live coverage of this macabre. That was a day that my mother and my grandmother lost almost their mind, and almost you see people that you know how innocent they are, and you see them overnight hanging like this with such a humiliation. And so my father, like many of the community, took a decision to gamble with our lives and to try and escape Iraq. Even though Jews were not allowed to travel more than 5-kilometer radius without a police permit. They were, as I said, they had yellow ID cards, which would give the game away. But in spite of that, my father decided to take that gamble.
And how did you get out of Iraq?
Well, in August 1971, my father got us together and he told us that we are going to go for it. We have 2 hours to say goodbye to everything we've ever collected in our house. And I remember me moving from one collection to another, saying goodbye to them. My grandmother, in the meantime, was actually cleaning the fridges for some reason, whatever. We were not allowed to speak to anyone. We were not allowed to say goodbye to our loved ones, to our neighbors. And we didn't even know whether we'll survive it or not. And at dusk, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we left the house as if we're going for a normal shopping day, because we know that, like every Jew was watched by the Mukhabarat. We drove the car, we locked the door normal, we took the car, locked the car and left it, and we took the train as we were instructed with a, I don't know whether we have time now to describe the whole thing, but it took about 3 days for finally actually managing to go to the Kurdish enclave, to the mountains of Kurdistan, where there was a kind of a warfare between the Kurdish people, who are Iraqis, and the Iraqi central government. And somehow, with their help and with their kindness, we were smuggled out after very hairy incidents and on the way to Iran. And that was 1971, August. And from there, we came to this country, to this great country, and asked for asylum. And we were granted that asylum. And we've been loyal citizens to this country ever since, just like we were in Iraq.
It's wonderful to hear your incredible and also moving and inspirational story. But you are just one voice amongst 850,000 Jewish people that have been living centuries in the Arab lands and throughout North Africa. Why is the issue of the Jewish refugees one that is the forgotten story?
Well, because sometimes the world doesn't listen. Sometimes the world have selective listening and memory mode, and pick what they want and just completely ignore what they don't. Such an incredible story, which is based on hundreds of thousands of documents and people who actually lived themselves with their pictures. I've got pictures of my family, and yet no one knows about it. How come? You ask, how come? How come none of the wonderful people who give exhibitions year after year for the Palestinian Nakba across Europe? Today, the word Nakba is almost a European word. Everyone knows it. How come none of them have asked himself, is there another side to that coin? Should I do a little bit of research? Should I speak? Should I check on the internet? Do I look at a book? No, absolutely not.
And we've got a clip to go to now that just tells a few of those stories of the forgotten Jewish refugees from Arab lands.
I didn't want to think about all what happened, so I just buried my past. There were 38,000 Jews living in the northern part of Libya at the time. Today, there are none left, Mafdal had. The community is totally extinct.
If somebody wants to understand what is going on in the Middle East, they have to understand the Jewish refugees from Arab countries.
Buried beneath the headlines of the Mideast conflict is the forgotten story of the region's indigenous Jewish communities. In 1945, up to 1 million Jews lived in the Middle East outside of the Palestine Mandate. Within a few years, only a few thousand remained. The ancient Jewish quarters of Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad were once vibrant, bustling centers. Today, they are silent. In the year 586 BCE, Babylonian armies destroyed Solomon's temple in Jerusalem and exiled the Jews of Judea to Babylon, modern-day Iraq.
My family is among the Jews who stayed on that land for the next 2,600 years until around 1950. Jews who stayed in the region are known as Mizrahim, which in Hebrew means Easterners. They either stayed on that land of Babylon, as my family did, or they migrated to lands throughout the region, whether it was Iran, whether it was Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and so on, the entire region.
In many of these countries, for example, North Africa, Egypt, Babylonia, Jews preceded the Arabs by many centuries, and sometimes by millennium.
In the year 622, a new religion emerged out of the Arabian Peninsula. Within a few years, Arab Muslim armies had conquered most of the Middle East. Mizrahi Jews found themselves referred to by an Arabic word, Dhimmi.
A dhimmi or a dhamma, depending on the pronunciation, is a tolerated people. It's the people of the book, Christians and Jews, people who worship, practice the Bible. And according to Islam, this is a group that's supposed to be protected. What that means is, as Islam conquered the entire Middle East, North African region and killed people in the name of Islam if they would not convert, the Jews and Christians would be spared their lives. However, they always had to be both physically and metaphorically inferior. For example, a Jew could not ride a horse because then his head would be higher than that of a Muslim. Jews could not build a synagogue higher than a mosque.
Under European colonial powers, dhimmi laws were largely abolished and many Jews flourished. But in the 1930s, a tide of Arab nationalism swept the countries of the Middle East as they emerged from colonial rule. Strident Arab nationalist leaders often made Jews a scapegoat for social discontent.
There was a pattern of Arab government, state-sanctioned, indeed state-orchestrated repression, which included intimidation, harassment, beatings, persecution, and even murder.
In 1940, Haj Amin al-Husseini was the most prominent leader of the Palestinian Arabs and the head of the Arab Higher Committee, the central political organization of the Arabs of Palestine. He and Hitler discussed plans to establish concentration camps in the Middle East. He delivered a radio address to the Arab world on Nazi radio saying, "Arabs, rise as one man and fight for your sacred rights. Kill the Jews wherever you find them." His words reverberated across the Middle East.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. That video clip there puts a lot of these issues into their historical perspective. Edwin, I just in the course of researching this program, really when it comes down to Libya, was shocked to find what happened to the Jewish community in Libya, which can trace its origins back to some 2,600 years. The Jews faced terrible oppression under the Italian fascists in the 1930s. And from the onset of World War II, when the Nazis occupied the Jewish quarter of Benghazi, more than 2,000 Jews were deported across the desert, where over 1/5 of them actually perished. And at the end of the war, when the British were in control, more than 140 Jews were massacred, and every synagogue in the city was looted. What's the situation like now for any Jew with Libyan descent wanting to go back post the fall of Colonel Gaddafi?
Well, I'm glad you chose Libya, although you could have chosen any other country as well, because I just happened to want to share with you a couple of examples about Libyan Jewry after the so-called Arab Spring and after so-called the democracy and the rule of law that happened recently. A wonderful guy by the name of David Gerby went and worked with the revolutionary, with the rebels throughout as a medic, risked his life, was lauded for it, was thanked for it at the time. And when the revolution succeeded and Gaddafi was killed, David Gerby thought the first natural thing to do was to go and search. By the way, there is not a single Jew in Libya who remained after these things. These people, the Gerby came from Italy. There are zero Jews in there. So he thought the natural thing is I'll look for a synagogue and clean it. So he went to one of the many tens of synagogues that were there, start just cleaning the Teba, the Torah, where you put the Torah. He was surrounded by a mob. He was going to be lynched. He was spirited out to his hotel. By the next day, people knew about it, surrounded the hotel with leaflets, some of them written in Arabic and some of them written in Hebrew. And it says, "One Jew is one Jew too many." They would not tolerate the one single Jew who worked with the rebels, risked his life. They would not tolerate that one single Jew. The same thing was repeated 2 months ago. A UK resident by the name of friend of mine by the name of Raphael Luzon. He thought, well, that was at the time of the law and order was not restored, so he'll go now that it looks like there's a government, there's a prime minister in transit, in waiting. So he goes there, invited. And what happens to him? From his hotel, he gets out of the lift, and there's 14 people with machine guns take them around, and had it not been for the intervention of some incredibly powerful people, both here and in Europe, he would have been dead meat. This is a story of what happens when you go back. So for all those people who say, well, you Jews left, but if you want to go back, the door is always open, you've got stories now to tell them otherwise.
And really, when we look at the issue of the Jewish refugees from the Arab lands, really what it amounts to really is an ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people from across the Middle East. And what we're seeing now is that the same thing that's happened to the Jews is now beginning to happen to the Christians. Isn't this one of the major reasons why the UN, the European Union, the British government, the American government need to take the issue of the forgotten Jewish refugees seriously in order to preserve ethnic minorities in the Arab world?
I think this is a wonderful question. There's a saying in Arabic, we used to say that after Shabbat, after Saturday, comes Sunday. And that's really exactly what happened. What I just cannot understand at all, and please, you can ask other guests, maybe they can explain, the absolute complete silence, the conspiracy of silence in the Western governments, the so-called Christian Western government, about what is happening to the Christian minorities in there. Only 10% of the Christians in Iraq remained out, and even those people daily are under attack. They're being slaughtered in the churches. But I mean, the news that I get, every Iraqi who can read Arabic know about it. Even like 4 weeks ago, the government, the actual police and the army raided every club in Iraq which serves alcohol. They all were serving alcohol legally. It's of course all run, these clubs, social clubs and shops run by Christians. And it's legal. Iraq always was tolerant, always was a mosaic. Yet they went in, they didn't close them, they beat every member there, they smashed the furniture, they destroyed things. This is government taking the living out of these people's livelihood. And not one single protest, neither in the mainstream press nor in the leadership, of they giving billions of dollars in aid, unconditional. Would you not think that you would want to protect your own people? And of course, from our point of view, you're absolutely right. Our story is also about exposing the situation of the minorities in all of the Middle East. It's not about just crying about the past. We all rebuilt our lives. It is about learning lessons. It's about, as you said at the beginning, truth and reconciliation. And I think that you just hit the nail on the head.
And, just in the course of researching this program, we did want to show an excellent clip of you speaking at the UN just only in September, only a couple of months ago. And what was very shocking, and this is, I think, this is one of the speakers who said that since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, there's been over 160 UN General Assembly resolutions on the Palestinian refugee problem, with no reference to the Jewish refugees from Arab lands. 10 major UN agencies have been established to deal with the Palestinian refugees, and not one agency looking into the Jewish refugee problem. Surely this is an absolute outrage. Why is this the case?
It is total outrage. It is. I can't. I mean, how does this person, who is a diplomat, who is educated, how does he vote 160 times? I'm talking about the combined diplomacy of the international community, without asking a question, without asking a query, without checking, without looking. How does he sleep at night, voting against one state and one story, day in, day out, with such utter and complete prejudice to the other? by the way, our issue is not about belittling the suffering of the Palestinians or to deny what happened to them. But whatever happened to them happened to us. And as one of the speakers in the United Nations event said, the Jews of the Arab countries left behind properties the size of 5 Israels. The state of Israel 5 times were left behind. What you said about ethnic cleansing, it is the actual definition of ethnic cleansing what happened to us. Because it wasn't just getting every Jew out. It was our language, our shrines, our legacy. Everything was wiped out. What fired me to almost spend an obsessive amount of time on this issue is that when I once spoke about Jews of Iraq, a sub-editor of a national paper came up to me and said, this is a fascinating story. I didn't even know there were Jews in Iraq. And that lit up a red light for me. That in my lifetime, I, who suffered directly, who saw our relatives hanging, who left Iraq like a criminal in the night, who risked his life just to escape with the shirt on. And my story is being erased from the narrative of the Middle East while I'm alive. So what will happen when my son, who was born here, what will they tell him then?
We've got a clip to go to now that looks at the issue of the Jewish refugees and compares that to those of the Palestinian refugees.
1945. World War II is finally over. Europe is filled with tens of millions of refugees. 2 years later, Great Britain lost control of Southeast Asia. India and Pakistan win independence, and 7 million Muslim refugees exchange places with 7 million Hindi refugees. Today, not one of these people is a refugee. Not one. They have integrated into their host countries and built new lives. And then there are the Palestinians. In 1947, the United Nations presented a partition plan for the Jewish homeland. The Arabs gave a resounding no to that plan. They rejected a state for themselves if it meant also giving a state to the Jews. 6 Arab states attacked the fledgling Jewish state, which was small but plucky and determined to survive. In the meantime, many of the Arab inhabitants left their homes because of the war and the promise by Arab leaders that the Jews would be defeated quickly. They planned to return when they won the war and the Jews had been thrown into the sea. To their great surprise, they lost. Several 100,000 Arabs had become refugees. Later on, they would be called Palestinian refugees. On the other hand, at about the same time, 850,000 Jews were forced out of their homes all over the Middle East. They had lived in the Arab world for thousands of years, but when the Arabs were defeated and the State of Israel was established, it was too much for the Arab regimes, and they showed their Jews the door. Therefore, you could say that the Arabs and the Israelis exchanged populations, much like in Europe after World War II, and much like the Hindus and Muslims in India and Pakistan, and leave things at that. But the Arabs aren't willing to leave things at that. If they had, the Arab states would have done what Israel did a long time ago with the Jews from Arab states: integrate the Palestinians into their society and provide them with citizenship. Wow, what a not revolutionary idea! So why weren't they given citizenship or any other rights? The Palestinians were deliberately kept as refugees so that they could be used as a weapon in the war against Israel. And why would the Palestinians, who supposedly want to establish an independent state, struggle at the same time to send their refugees to live in Israel, a different state? Can Israel, a country with only 6 million Jews, allow millions of Palestinian refugees to come and take over the only Jewish homeland?
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. Edwin, really, you've had incredible success with the Israeli government, because the Israeli government under certainly the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and Danny Alon, the Deputy Foreign Minister, has been a strong advocate of the issue to do with the forgotten Jewish refugees from Arab lands, and has made it a central pillar in any future peace negotiations with the Palestinians. How is it only now that the Israeli government have woken up to the seriousness and the importance of this issue?
I have no idea, and no one has. We have been trying to find why, but at the moment we have no time. Because the good news is on the subject is, as Michel Huberman, my dear friend, wrote last week in the Jerusalem Post, what we always used to say, the forgotten Jewish refugees. We are on the brink of removing the word forgotten. Because we actually, maybe a dozen activists around the world have been knocking doors for the last 7-8 years, trying to show all the governments, especially the Israeli government, that this is an issue of human rights. This is an issue that answers Ahmadinejad when he says Israel is a European colonial entity. We are the indigenous crowd, and we had our right taken away from us, and it's time for the international community to stand up and look at it. And finally, we have a breakthrough, as you mentioned, Danny Alon's work, but others as well, who pushed this into the Knesset, and now it has become a subject that what happens in the last 2 months, since there was a Jerusalem conference followed by the United Nations event, we are inundated. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, BBC issued for the first time in 64 years, the BBC is mentioning Jewish refugees from Arab land. 64 years of silence has been broken. So almost daily we are now inundated with articles, with stories, and in fact, yesterday, the foreign minister, for the first time, held a conference in Jerusalem, foreign minister of Israel, and said Israel will never give up on this subject, no matter what it takes. What we need to do now, we are making a breakthrough in the U.S. Congress, and hopefully in the Senate, and definitely in the Canadian Parliament. What we need to do now is to actually penetrate Europe. European Parliament, the British Parliament, and that's when everybody can help. Anyone who's got an MP, go there, whatever you speak with, mention what about the Jewish refugees. What we want is whenever the word Palestinian refugees is mentioned, somebody stand up and says, what about the Jewish refugees? There were as many, if not more. They left as much, as if not more. We're not trying to belittle their things, but hey, play it equal, play even-handed. Mention both sets, and let's then move on to resolve it once and for all, with the help of the international community, with the goodwill of hopefully with the Arab countries, definitely of Israel. Let's resolve that. Let's get these refugees who are sitting like caged animals at the moment, Palestinian refugees, hundreds of thousands of them. Let's get them back into real life, productive life. Let's educate them. Let's have them nationality. Let them join us together in getting our rights redressed together, the Palestinian refugees and the Jewish refugees. And that's what we're asking for.
Which is excellent. I mean, you talked just then about the viewers getting involved, and I know that so many of our viewers are very passionate about this issue. How can they raise these sort of issues with their MPs? I know we've got your website, which is harif.org, which you can go to. But is there anything that they can actually get involved in, get the information, read for themselves, and do something?
At the moment, we are doing a public relation act. We want people to know. Harif.org, if you press the news on it, there's a clip. You have everything I've said documented from whatever. Arm yourself with facts. Get the facts about the difference in treatment. When you said 160 resolutions against none, $37 billion has been spent on the Palestinian refugees compared to zero for the Jewish refugees. When you've got these, and you know what you're talking about, then when you approach people like MPs, like MEPs, and say, what about the Jewish refugees? We don't think people are ignoring it only because they hate us. That's not what we're saying. It's ignorance as well. Get the facts, help us, donate through harif.org so that we can get the resources to carry on with this work. Invite us to your churches, invite us to your halls. We will supply speakers, we will supply films and documents, and we promise you a wonderful, moving, inspiring evening, because at the end of the day, we also look with optimism and hope to a quick resolution in the next few years, please God.
Yeah, absolutely. And this issue is so important because I believe that this issue goes to the heart of the Middle East conflict. And if there's going to be a future for, which I believe there is, the State of Israel, and a future for the Christian community across the Arab world, then this issue has to be recognised by the UN, by the EU, by the British government and by the United States, and taken seriously, on equal measure as the Palestinian refugee problem. But some of the arguments that many Arab opinion leaders have been making, and that is that Jews that formerly lived in Arab lands are welcome to return to those homelands. Now, considering the rise of the Arab Spring, which I'll describe as the Arab Winter, surely a Jewish person like described in Libya wouldn't live very long if the Jewish community returned to the Arab lands.
I think they said it themselves. One Jew is one Jew too many. Let alone, can you imagine hundreds of thousands of Jews dropping back and to Benghazi or to Baghdad or to one of these countries? What will happen to them? I leave it to your imagination, and you don't need to use imagination. You can look at what's happening to the Christian communities. They are also a lot more ancient. Look at the Copts in Egypt. They are more ancient than the Arab people who came in, who occupied these countries. They were by hundreds and thousands of years, yet look at where they're going with that. So this argument is totally, absolutely spurious, and I would not even give it the attention. It's total waste of time to do that.
And just before we go, can you just show a picture of your family, your Iraqi family? Just
yes, this is my grandparents.
Okay, can you lift it up a bit? Lift up a bit.
Yes.
There we go.
I have, like everyone else, we live through our pictures. That's all that's left from our birthplace, from our country, from our language, from our way of life. Okay. Pictures. So every Jew, if you meet an Arab Jew, ask him to show you what he has, and all that's left is memories.
Edwin, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest today on the Middle East Report, and fully 100% behind your cause, because I believe that this issue is crucial to bringing peace and reconciliation in the Middle East, and it's important that the world wakes up and realises that we need to stand with Israel and the Jewish people, but also to remember what happened to the Jewish refugees from Arab lands. So thank you for being my guest today.
I'm very grateful for giving us the opportunity to air this issue. Thank you, Simon.
And I want to thank you all for watching today's Middle East Report. Here we go. We're talking today about the issue of the Jewish refugees from Arab lands, and finally their voices are being heard. They're being heard in the United Nations. It's important that we raise our voices in support of those forgotten Jewish refugees who suffered incredible discrimination and persecution, in which the modern state of Israel absorbed over 600,000 Jewish refugees, and it's important that we remember them. And we're going to play this song that is in tribute to those courageous, brave men and women who are from those ancient homelands in North Africa and the Arab world.